Hello, and welcome to another episode of Build Further, a podcast about making remote work by Clap. In today's episode, you get to hear all about how to build a successful business that's remote from day one. Jonathan Widawski founded Maze in 2018 along with Thomas Mary. Since then, they've turned it into the highest rated user research platform in the world. As well as a wealth of knowledge about building a business, Jonathan has an incredible philosophy on why everyone needs to speak to their customers more, and the amazing things that happen when you do just that. He really believes in putting the power of learning into the hands of people who need it. Now, Maze helps more than 80,000 companies crush silos, keep their teams aligned, and communicate clearly while still keeping meeting time to a minimum. If you're interested in how to build a business that can grow exponentially every year while empowering a remote team, this is the episode for you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to chat with you today.
Good, that's awesome. Would you always go by Joe? You never go by John or Jonathan? When we were talking originally, I wasn't sure which nickname to give you.
Yeah, it's a UX thing, I guess. It's shorter, it's easier to spell out. So yeah. It's Joe. Joe is how people call me. I even at the last offsite we had, my name tag was like Jo Widawski, which is super funny to me because it's literally not my name. But yeah, so that's Joe.
It's ended up being Joe. Okay, great. Well, Joe, thanks so much for being here. Before we kind of dive into the deeper topics of like product and async communication and distributed work, I would love to just hear about you and about Maze. I would love it if you could explain just a little bit to me in your own words what Maze does and how long you've been building up this company and what you guys are working on now.
Yeah. So I'll try to make a short version of that answer. Maybe I'll start with who I am. So before Maze, I'm a product person. I've been in product my whole life. So before Maze, I was leading product design and research in different agencies in Paris. So my role there was teaching people how to do design and research and then ultimately sell these things. And so the challenge we had at the time was that while everyone agreed research was critical in projects, the reality was that research was we were almost never able to sell it. And the reason was it's a long, expensive, time-consuming process. And so for most of our customers, it was a challenge to get budget approved, to get time approved. And if it really took 8 weeks to get a full research fleshed out, but 3 weeks to build something, the problem we would face was that people would say, let's build instead, right? And so that's what we aimed at solving with Maze. So 4 years ago today, we went on a journey to democratize research. And so for us, what that really meant was we need to make research happen for companies of all sizes, which we sell to the smallest startup as much as we sell to IBM and SAP. We need to democratize research by making research available for every industry. And so we sell to Porsche and Walmart and any other company that has a digital asset. And finally, the most important part of the story is that we make research happen for everyone within those organizations. And so what that means is that we realized very early on that there was a ratio of 1 to 100 between research people and the rest of the product organization, which meant that companies have 100 times the means to build as they have the means to learn. And so what we wanted to do was how do we solve for putting the means of learning in the hands of the people that are actually building. And so our users are designers and product managers and product marketers. Less than 5% of our user base are actual researchers. And that unlocked both growth, but also education of the market at a pace that was not just there before, right? And so today we exist in a bit more than 80,000 companies worldwide. We're a team of 130 people in 36 countries to solve for that. So that's kind of the short version of the journey we've been on. And it's been fun. And we're now the most used user research platform in the world as well. So it's an exciting journey.
Yeah, I saw you posting your winning 2022 stats the other day. It's pretty wild, you know. Like I obviously I know Maze quite well, and I have a lot of friends who work at Maze, and I knew you guys were doing well. But to see those big numbers at the end of the year is quite amazing. And has it come as a shock, or was 22 a big year for you guys, or is this always expected?
So it's been a ramp up. So these surveys go out every year since 2019. And I remember for us in 2019, even appearing on the chart was mind blowing, right? Like even it being the small blip on the chart compared to the rest of the space was like, holy shit, there's something to celebrate, right? Mm-hmm. And then we've built our way up in the past few years. So last year we were just behind Zoom and Google Meet. The real surprise for us was that for the first time in the history of this survey, in the history of generally research, a specialized tool made it to the top of the list, which is us today, right? So all of a sudden now, it means that there's a level of education for the market that has just grown to the point where there can be a specialized tool that people use to run the research. And that was the real surprise for us. So yeah, surprising, but kind of expected through the ramp up that we've seen in the past few years.
Great. That's so interesting. And was your plan always to kind of have this ratio of customers where most of your customers aren't researchers? Was that always the plan, or did that happen out of the blue?
So I'd like to joke around that a lot of the vision that you have for your company is a lot about shooting arrows and bring the target around them afterward for the one that stick, right? And so that's what we found, right? I don't think that was a plan originally. I think we thought that we wanted research to be democratized, but for us, we didn't really know what that meant. And so the first version of the product that we released was almost an analytics for InVision prototype at the time, right? And so that was the iteration one of what we did. It was just people are building prototypes, and at the time that was with InVision, but they don't have any data on the prototype that they've been creating. That was almost impossible to get the same level of data you had post-development from pre-development. And so we built this first version of the product, and we found a very strong initial product market fit for this specific product line. And what happened then was that we realized, holy shit, actually, 80% of the people that sign up are designers. And so that shaped entirely the vision for the company, because more importantly than these are designers that are using the platform, I believe that's what led to the success that we're seeing today, which is that all of a sudden we unlocked the market entirely, right? It's the same thing that happened in data 10 years ago, if you think about it. 10 years ago, you had people that had data team and people that didn't have data team. And the problem was that the people that didn't have data team, they really didn't have access to data. And then platforms like Amplitude and Mixpanel came in, and what they did was they really made data self-serve for the rest of the organization. And so all of a sudden, you could have a small data team, but the data would be spread across the organization. So it was more of a cultural shift around data, that it was a tool that saw the data. And so that's exactly what we tried to solve with Maze, right? We saw that we were solving for designers, and all of a sudden we said, well, this is what we need to do, right? To make research something that happens in every organization, we need to exist even in organizations that don't have researchers. And that was what led to the vision that we have today.
That's so interesting, because I know how hard, I think one of the biggest struggles for a lot of, especially like small startups, is defining your customer, right? And who is buying our product, and who should be buying our product, and who do we want to be buying our product. They're completely different things. And I would love to hear more. Was it hard to kind of back down from your original intention of like, we're going to have researchers do this, or were those conversations quite natural?
No, it was quite natural. I would say that there was a tension. So for a long time, every time there's this shift in markets, there's this conversation about, should designers research and should product managers run research? And so the natural tension that will exist between your original target personas and how your tool will not replace them, but empower them to do their best work, right? And so we had to navigate this tension more than anything, but no, we find it very natural actually to have the designers use the platform. And then the next iteration of the product, we released our automatically generated report, which was the big new step in the journey, right? It was, we need to make it extremely simple for people to create tests because they are non-researchers. So it needs to be extremely easy for them to get to a place where they ask relevant questions to their audience. We need to make it easy for them to share with their audience. So one link to share with their audience. And then we need to make it extremely easy to consume the results of this research, so that they can make decisions even if they're non-researchers, right? Even if they don't have the know-how on how to process the data. And so the report was a step in this direction. And what we realized was that this was what led to the next breadth of success for us, because Figma was not successful because it allowed two designers to move blocks inside one single file. It was successful because all of a sudden design was exposed to the rest of the organization. All of a sudden you had a CEO inside the design file, right? And that's what happened for us when we released the report. It was all of a sudden research, which used to be like a small siloed part of the organization, was exposed to the rest of the org. We saw CEO inside the research report. We saw VP marketing inside the research report. So all of a sudden we had the exposure to expand and prove the value of research beyond the research team. And that was the big success here.
That is so interesting, isn't it? I think I've had thoughts like this recently where I'm like, I do have this, I talk about a lot about kind of the full stack designer.
Hmm.
Designers need to be UX researchers and they need to be product people as well, and they need to almost be able, they also need to be copywriters. And I love this idea of people, jumping into different files that they shouldn't be, and kind of having their hands on everything. I think the democratization of data is such an important thing, especially in a company like how many people are you at Maze now?
130 people.
130 people. So you are like a small to medium sized business, and like it's important. It's important
Yes.
that you guys, like everyone, has access to data. My experience of working in similar sized companies is the distance you feel from data sometimes is so, it slows you down so much.
Yeah. But it's interesting that you're saying that because the journey that we're on right now is so the fact that you perceive data as the default state of where a company needs to be is the work of 10 years of data companies trying to build up the fact that data needs to be the default, right? So again, coming back to the amplitude, the mixed panel, the category creation they've tried to build is like, no, it's not just data analysts that need to churn out report. It's a designer needs to access data and an engineer needs to access data, and data needs to be, everyone needs to be data fluent. It's a default state of being for organization. And this exact playbook is what we're trying to replicate for research. Is saying, no, research is not just a nice to have. It's a default state that your organization needs to be in to thrive and to exist in their market, right? And so that's the category creation, the category building that you need to engage in if you want to be successful. So yeah, it's exact same journey. The data fluency and the research fluency, which is at the end of the day the same thing, right? Research is just a data point. Needs to be a default state for everyone: designers, product managers, engineers, everyone.
That's great. And did you have any customers kind of fight back, or have you had many people kind of fight back and be like, I don't think this is a good idea, or I don't think everyone needs to have access to data, or has it been easier than that?
Um, it's been easier. Most of the challenges we have are around the level of education of the market. So when we started Maze, there was this great document from InVision at the time that was called the Design Frontier. And what they did was they mapped out the level of maturity of design in the market. And what they mapped out was like there's the level 1 to the level 5. And for level 1, design is mockups, right? So in a company that's level 1, design is you create pretty mockups. And in level 5, design and research are strategic decisions, right? And so what we found originally was that we were focusing on the level 4 and level 5. So people that were already problem aware and solution aware, and that were just trying to unlock faster research for the organization. But the rest of the time that we had, we spent educating the level 1 to the level 3, right? Getting them to a place where they were embedded in the value of research. Because more than do we need data, the challenge we had originally was about do we need research entirely, right? Or perceiving the value of research and the ROI of research. Because research is unique in a way that if you're running successful research, you won't see the ROI, right? Because you won't fail. So there's a challenge proving the ROI, because if done right, you won't fail and you won't see the value of it. So that's been kind of the key challenge we had to solve for.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's like you shouldn't start drinking water when you get a headache. You should drink water so you don't get a headache.
Exactly. I'll steal this one, but that's exactly right. Right. So it's a challenge for that reason. But yeah.
Okay, that's and are you dog fooding Maze? Are you using the product internally a lot as well?
I mean, you know we do, right? It's all the time. We probably have 10 projects running at any time, and we use it for de-risking everything. Because so while we started with a very simple product, which was well, simple in the sense of like a very focused product, in the sense of it was prototype testing. We then expanded more and more on the vision, right? It was then a research platform, and today we are called the continuous product discovery platform. And so what we identified was that we started with this very simple use case in which we found product market fit. And then we said, how do we expand on that? How can we unlock more insight moment in the product development process? And so we went backward. Instead of going post development at the time, what we did was we said, how can we help product managers de-risk problems and solutions that they want to solve for? So is it the right problem we need to solve for? Is it the right solution for that problem? Is it the right design for that solution? Is it the right value proposition before we move to development? And so we solved for all of these use cases. And now a big next step for us is going into the post-development world that we're releasing in the next few weeks, which is closing the loop on insights, right? So anything ranging from are we solving the right problem all the way to post-development. Now that the feature is live, is it satisfactory for our users? we want to be here to help you assess these moments and treat them as loops of insights that you can act on.
This is really interesting because I would love to talk to you a little bit about kind of this idea of closing the feedback loop and ticking off tasks and making decisions, because this is something that at Clap we're always trying to figure out the best way to do, and something that we're always trying to tackle with our product. So I'd love to hear a little bit about internally at Maze, like how do you go about making strong decisions and not just kind of feeding back forever?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so we have what we call the quant qual quant sandwich, which is a funny thing, but it's kind of the standard in the market now. So the first thing to understand is that there's a big philosophical belief that every piece of the product development process is a deliverable. So what I believe truly is that when you look at the way products are being built, it hasn't really changed in the past 20 years. We went from waterfall, which was we're going to release product in a year, right? And then we learn, to lean, where it's like we're going to build the product for the next month and then release it. But the process internal to these systems are still the same. You have an idea, you design it, you develop it, you release it, and then you learn, right? So one was a year. The next iteration is a shorter version of the year, but we shortened the iteration loop, but we didn't necessarily change the way that we think about the loop itself and the things that are internal to these processes. And so at Maze, the key belief that we have is that a problem can be tested, and a solution can be tested, and a design can be tested, and a value proposition can be tested. And so that's how we think about all of these things. For every point of iteration, what we do is that we'll define a quantitative survey first that will help us generate ideas, right? Generate ideas around what we need to be building. And then once we identify themes that we think are relevant, we'll go into the qualitative mode and we'll run interviews with our users to dive deeper into some of these generative ideas that we created. And once we are in a place where we have something that we think is relevant and that we want to expose to our audience, we then go back to a quantitative mode. And so we'll create then a survey to assess the desirability for the thing that we built. And so for every step of the product development process, that's how we will go about assessing and testing things.
Wow.
And, yeah.
You are testing literally you are talking the talk and walking the walk. You guys are testing every step of the way.
I mean, we have to set the bar pretty high, I guess, because as a research platform, if we're not doing that, then who will, right? So yeah. And it's also because we believe in it, right? We believe that that's the way to build product in the future. So we need to be big advocates, just like I'm assuming at Clap, you're not doing any meetings. I mean, that's my assumption at this point.
We try our very, very best to
Exactly.
keep the cleanest calendars in all of startup tech. It's
exactly.
It's
exactly. You have to set the tone.
You have to set the tone, and this is the thing. Yeah, you have to kind of take these strong stances. And speaking of setting the tone, I read last week. I was reading your report you did with Atlassian. You're about continuous research, and it's an amazing report. It's full of great information, and it's stunning, and it's visually really, really great. I would love to hear more about this. Like I was really enjoying reading about continuous research, and like what you're saying about now is kind of, the research process never ends. And I think a lot of companies maybe are at fault of like, okay, we'll do user testing at the start and at the end, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so. If you like the report, and I can talk more about the report, I also suggest reading the article from the CPO at Figma, who released an article called Work in Progress, which I think talks about very similar things, right? I think that we moved away from a world where we believe there's a start and an end to a product, and we start thinking about product as a living, breathing thing, because that's what it is, right? A product is never done. And so at Maze, just like at Figma, we believe that, everything is a work in progress, and everything has a shelf life. And so because of the two things, everything is in constant motion. So it's funny that you mentioned the report as well, because one interesting fact about Maze is that our first employee at Maze was a content writer, right? She's now a director of content at Maze. And that's because
Eleanor, correct?
Exactly.
She's amazing. Yeah.
She's incredible.
I've had lots of people introduce me to her. They'd be like, "You need to meet this person."
She's absolutely amazing, and she's worked on the foundation of education for us for the past. She was here almost day one of building this company, so she's almost a co-founder to this company. And so, but what's interesting there is that we didn't, I think saying that it was intentional would be lying. At the time, I think it was just we were lucky to hire someone as exceptional as she is, and also that she had a vision for why content would be so important at Maze. Um, because again, because we're selling research to non-researchers, 90% of our work is not necessarily fighting competitors. It's more about educating the market, getting the market to a place where um, they know how to run research and they understand the process. So that's why we need to advocate externally, and we need to use also brand names like Atlassian, like Dovetail, all the people we can to educate the market on research. And that's also why we're also happy to work with people within the space, even sometimes some people that we would consider competitors, because we believe that there's a greater goal behind what we're doing, that we should all work together in educating the research market. And it's not just an us play, it's an everyone's play if we want to be successful.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think there's a few really amazing pieces out there from companies that kind of do a great job of kind of not ignoring the competition and kind of acknowledging it and kind of being like, okay, cool, let's all get better together.
Exactly.
It's very
Especially
hard.
it's very hard, but also like people forget, right? When we started Maze, the big question VCs had for us was, is there going to be a research space, right? Because when you looked at the space, it hadn't really moved for the past 20 years. There's user testing that was here, and that was the only somewhat successful company, and that was pretty much it. So for us, I've always now smile when people ask me, how are you guys going to own the space? Because it's a much more interesting question for me to answer than, is there going to be a research space? So people forget how much work had to be done by the space itself to make it an obvious space now. But that was not the case 4 years ago. That was not, I would even say that was not the case 2.5 years ago. So yeah,
Wow.
it's exciting to see.
Good. That's great. That's a good way to kind of read that things are going well. And I would love to
Yeah.
hear, like, on that subject of like community and building. As Maze has always been a remote company, am I correct, or have you guys moved?
Fully remote from day one, remote before COVID as well. So we were remote before it was cool to be remote.
That is good to know, because so many companies had crazy teething problems moving into remote world. So I would love to hear how Maze kind of, you said, was it 36 countries you have employees in?
Yep. Yep.
So I would love to hear how you kind of manage those people and protect everyone's time, and what tools you use to make sure that everyone's getting things done without having to constantly just live in each other's ears.
Yeah, I think all of this comes from a place of both being very intentional, but also giving clear direction for the rest of the team to operate in. I think that the need for meeting and the need for constant communication is kind of a symptom of a lack of clear direction. For people to be able to own goals and targets, you need to set strict guardrails in which they can operate. So for us, it's being very intentional about what we share with the rest of the organization. So we start with a very clear plan that we need to achieve for the year. And then we share that with the rest of the organization, and every manager will have to kind of carve out what that means for every team and the mission for this specific team that work for them. And so that allows us to limit the number of touch points that we need to have with people. And then on top of that, we are very async, right? So we're an async first company, whatever that means. And so we work within Notion a lot. 90% of our knowledge is treated in Notion. For anything live communication, we use Slack, but Slack is mainly used for cultural building and meme sharing, and none of the actual work related instances. But yeah, we also try to keep it extremely light, right? I think that especially in a remote setting, you want to be very intentional about the tools that you use, because you want to avoid both the tool fatigue, but also for knowledge to be spread across, right? And so for us, that means being very, very light on the tooling that we use, and that has worked really well for us. So yeah, it's funny also that you mentioned that, because when we started Maze, again, remote was a non-obvious choice, right? We joked at the time that it was we were making it harder for ourselves, right? Because the reality was we were advocating for the world that remote allowed us to hire the best people everywhere. The reality at the time was that we were only able to really hire people that already had a remote experience, right? And so that we had an infinite pool, but the reality was we had a limited pool because we didn't want to teach people how to run remote. But this choice that we made intentionally at the time of hiring people that had this remote experience also helped us build on very strong remote foundation, because then every senior leader that we had had seen the journey of a remote organization scale. And so they could build the right foundation for their own team as well. So for example, our VP of people was the VP of people at GitLab, where she scaled the team from 300 to 1.3 thousand people fully remote, right? That was the same for our VP of support, who was the VP of support at InVision. And so all of these people came in and they built the right foundation for the team to operate in.
That's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. How did you guys arrive at that decision when you first made the company? Why did you decide, let's do it? Let's be remote?
I think so. With my co-founder, we were remote for the past 7 years before that. So he was living in London and I was living in Paris. And so remote was kind of the obvious choice. And then when we looked at the lifestyle that we wanted for ourselves and the fact that we didn't want it to be tied to an office, but also that we truly believed that talent was everywhere, it was kind of an obvious choice. But I remember a lot of pushback from our board, our VCs, the whole market in general about going remote at a time where remote was a non-obvious decision. Looking back, it's very easy to say we knew, but we didn't. But I'm glad today that we made the decision.
Did you have? Are there any moments you can look back on and be like, "Wow, we were doing remote wrong then. We're doing it so much better now."
I mean, I don't know if there's a wrong. I mean, we were definitely doing things very differently. At the very beginning, we were doing daily stand-up for the company. Like we were doing a lot of meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's a function of the size of the company. Like I truly believe in the chaos of the early days and the early stage, and I really like the chaos of these days. I think that trying to over process things at a time where things are always shifting is an error, right? I see these very early stage companies that try to have like scalable process, and I'm like, no, don't have scalable processes. Have a call every day if you need to. Like do things that will definitely break as you get to 20 people. But that's the beauty also of being small. So I wouldn't say we made mistake. I would say like we have one value at Maze, which is everything has a shelf life, and it's about even processes that you create within your organization. All of this will have to be destroyed at some point. So yeah, no mistakes, just a lot of things that we had to break.
That's really good advice, because I think a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are kind of people who are either running or in very involved in the early stages of a company, and learning from you from the way you guys have done it. I think it's like such it's so incredibly useful, because now, like you say, you're one of the highest rated and most used testing tools in the world now. So it's it's so interesting looking at a company that it's like it was ahead of the curve and now is kind of so now you're fully established and ready for it. So I would love to talk a little bit more about as well that kind of like that what the calendars of people who work at Maze look like, because it's such I have this obsession with, I always want to see someone's calendar. I always want to be like, show me your calendar. I want to see what you're doing.
Holy
and I would
shit.
love to know. Definitely you do not need to show me your calendar, because but it's one of these very interesting things. I don't know if it's something you guys ever think about, is how much time do people have to themselves.
Oh yeah. So there's always this tension I found between async and sync time and when to use both of these tools. So in a remote setting, you will find a lot of. That's why I said earlier on that we were async first, whatever that means, because I believe async and sync both have their places as tools as an organization. So for me, for example, so I'll have most of my synchronous meetings are just one-ones with the people I manage, and that's pretty much it, right? The rest are asynchronous meetings. But we use the synchronous tools as well when we need to make company-wide decision that requires a lot of cross-functional effort, right? So, for example, defining the strategy for the company, defining a direction for the quarter, discussing the metrics for a specific month that's been a bad month for us, for example. So, I'm a bit worried always of async first as kind of a religion, because that's how a lot of people perceive it, right? It's like, but we're async first, and I'm like, those are lines we draw in the sand that's we are whatever is needed for the company to operate in. But yeah, we keep it extremely light. But if you look at my calendar, it's very full, but not with meetings, just the fact that I like to time box the things that I do, so it's always entirely packed. But yeah, most of my sync time is 1-1, and I think most managers' sync time is 1-1. And people, I'll give you an example. So yesterday we did the strategy meeting. It was a 3 hours call, and during the call we realized it's been a year and a half that we've done the 3 hours call. Like that literally never happens in our company. It doesn't. So yeah, we're really, really also very intentional about group meetings and not having too many people in calls, and making sure that time
Yeah.
is well used.
That is such a good one, because I've been in so many like all hands, you like there's 250 people, 300 people in the all hands, and it's so hard to engage. It's so hard for me to concentrate and care.
It's hard enough when you're in a real life environment, and I've been sitting in those meetings when I was working agencies at the time, and you're like, this is a waste of time. And so in a Zoom setup, it's even worse, right? Because the distraction amount you have is just absurd. So um, oh, I think I disconnected. The amount of distraction you have is just absurd. And so, I'm not expecting anyone in a 150 people meeting to be able to follow through for more than 30 minutes, basically. Like, I think that's the threshold of like focus.
That's a good way to look at it. And just to kind of take us into the last section of this episode, I just have like a couple questions I'd love to ask you just about the world of product and the future of
Hmm.
of Maze and working. So the first question would be, is the question I ask everyone, is there any like trend or something that's happening in the world of work right now? It can be in the world of product, or it can just be in the world of working in a company, that you think is every company should be doing, and you think in 5 years people will still be doing it. It could be something along the lines of using AI, or being a hybrid or remote company. Like they've said that 70% of companies will be entirely remote or hybrid by 2025. So I'd love to hear if there's any trends you believe in.
Yeah, I actually don't believe every company needs to be remote, so that definitely is not what I would say. I would say, I mean, I'm going to obviously talk a bit about research potentially about it.
Please
I
do.
think I think more than research, I think it's about blurring the line between organization and their users. I think that the companies that will win tomorrow in the next 5, 10, 15 years are the ones that are successful at creating this blurry line between themselves and the users that they serve, and creating a more constant loop of insight within an organization. For me, the companies that are successful at doing that not only have an edge on their market in their capacity to learn faster and deliver value faster. Like we went from a world that was all about the time to deliver, and now to me the world is going to shift to a time to write, right? And I think that's the way that we try to frame things. It's you're going to be successful if you optimize the cost of being wrong, and the time to being right, right? And so these two things you can do by involving more and more your users at every step of the process, being market research, product research, everything, just blurring this line between yourself and the people you try to solve things for.
That's great. And do you think this is something that any company, any size can do? And is there like a minimum? Like, is there a time that's too early to start doing that?
I think there's not. I mean, this is a softball question. I'll take it. No, there's no good. I mean, every time is a good time because the ROI of doing this changes as your company scales, right? If you're a very early stage startup and you're trying to build things, talking to your users constantly is going to help you get to product market fit faster. If you're in a scaling mode, talking to your users will help you prioritize the right bets, because as a scaling startup, you only have that many bets that you can do in a given year. And so prioritizing the right bets will allow you to be successful compared to the market you're trying to compete with. And then at a large scale organization, the ROI for you is going to be about the cost and the operational cost that you save, right? If you're IBM and you run a sprint, the sprint costs tens of millions of dollars, right? Just of developers, designers, time, etc. So saving one decision, like having one decision that you made right because of talking to your users, going to literally save you millions of dollars. And that's the shift of ROI depending on your scale.
That is, yeah, that's enough to scare me into start user testing now, like immediately.
That was the goal.
Perfect. You smashed that then. And the last thing I'd love to hear about is just, you don't need to reveal any kind of any inner secrets of Maze, but I would love to know what is it that you guys want to be working on in the future, as someone who's a product person deep down, and
Hmm.
loves the product you're working on. What is something you guys want to be moving the product to tackle soon?
Yeah, so we repositioned to a continuous product discovery platform because there's a lot of things that we want to do around, again, solving for more and more use cases in the product development process. So what that means, again, is we're going to go post development. So in a few weeks from now, we've been working for the past year on live website testing, which will allow our users to test their live website the same way that they've been testing their prototypes in the past, which is our most requested feature of all time. And then we are going to do contextual feedback as well, which is in your live product, you'll be able to start collecting insights. So you're going to be able to segment your user base and say, show this survey to people that are users of our platform, paying users of our platform, and that have already seen the settings page, for example. And then the next step for us, like the big next step for this year, is trying to surface more and more insights. And so what that means is that today what we do is we surface data, right? So you're a user of the platform. At the end of your test, we will show you like a report of the data that you've collected. And then the next step is how do we turn this data into actionable insights that you can consume more easily? So it's things like being able to use the segmentation that we have within the tool and say, oh, for male over 35, this feature is actually worth solving for. And for people that are already premium users of your product, this is a feature that you might not want to build. So these type of insights are the type of thing we're focusing on right now.
Wow, that's sounds amazing. It sounds so granular. It sounds amazing. It's almost like a one-to-one, tackling each customer one by one approach.
Exactly. And yeah, trying to solve for, like, we have such a breadth of audience that we're solving for that. Yeah, that will help us get more granular on the insight that we provide.
Amazing. I honestly, I could ask you questions all day because you've got so much to say and this has been so interesting. But I'll leave it there and let you get on with your day. But Jo, thank you so much for coming on this and just dropping loads of information. I really appreciate it.
Of course, Max. It's been great. Very excited for the next one, and thanks a lot for having me again.
Definitely, yeah, but it was one of my thoughts just in the past half hour is okay. When we do season 2, we have to have we have to have Jo again. If people want to kind of follow you and follow what Maze are doing, what's the best way they can do it? Where can they go?
Yeah, so LinkedIn or Twitter are the two main, I would say, platform, both for me and for Maze. So I'll send you the social, and you'll be able to add them to probably a link somewhere in a description somewhere.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the easiest way. I'm always available for DMs or anything. I have people reach out for research question or how to scale research, how to set up research in org. I'm always happy to chat about these things and help. So yeah, feel free to reach out on any of the social that will be shared.